Being asked this morning about how much the security services knew about the two main suspects arrested over the murder of a soldier in Woolwich. MPs and peers will examine what was known about the men who are still in hospital after being shot by police. 25-year-old drummer Lee Rigby from Greater Manchester was attacked and killed outside the Army barracks in South London on Wednesday, and dramatic new pictures have emerged showing two suspects charging at armed police as they arrived at the scene. Well, let's go live now to Ben Brown, who's there for us in Woolwich. Ben.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're outside the Royal Artillery Barracks where drummer Lee Rigby was based. These are some of the floral tributes that have been laid for him. Here you can see a young lady just reading some of the cards here that have been left. One, for example, saying, "So young but ever so brave, always a hero." And the people who have been coming here throughout the morning, laying flowers, some of them quite cheerful. We've seen some young mothers with their children in pushchairs laying flowers, laying cards, soft toys and balloons, all in memory of the young soldier who was hacked to death just in the street around the corner from here in John Wilson Street. Well, meanwhile, that footage has emerged of the moments after Lee Rigby was murdered, when armed police opened fire on the two suspects. 8 shots fired in all. The two suspects have been named as Michael Adebolajo, who was originally from Romford in Essex, and Michael Adebowale from Greenwich in southeast London, not far from here. 2 other people have been arrested, a man and a woman. They're being interviewed at the moment by counter-terrorism squad detectives. Well, let's get this report from Emily Unia with the latest developments. I should say you may find some of the images in her report disturbing.
Moments after the attack, a body can be seen lying in the road. We've obscured it. At the bottom of the picture, the two suspects show no signs of wanting to get away. Suddenly, one of the men, Michael Adebolajo, starts to run, dropping what may be a weapon. The police have arrived and he's charging towards them. What follows is a disturbing image of him writhing on the ground after being shot. The second man, Michael Adebowale, barely visible at the bottom of the picture, has also been shot. The 2 men are now in hospital, recovering from their injuries. The police are waiting to interview them when they're fit enough to talk. Both were known to MI5, but experts say it's impossible to watch everyone with extreme views.
When does a person who expresses radical views, who joins a radical group, flip over to be a violent extremist, somebody who's going to commit a crime like this? And to find the signals, the sort of red flags, as it were, I think is enormously hard.
Floral tributes are piling up at the roadside as local people try to make sense of what happened. Meanwhile, the police investigation continues. A man and a woman arrested yesterday remain in custody, and 6 properties have been searched. The victim, Lee Rigby of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, is described by those who knew him as a loving family man from Manchester. He was married with a 2-year-old son. Emily Unia, BBC News.
Well, now we can hear from the vicar who married Lee Rigby back in 2007 to his wife, Rebecca, who carried out that service. There have been all sorts of tributes paid to Lee Rigby. This is the Reverend Guy James.
So literally in the 5 or 10 minutes for a wedding service, people would want to come and just shake their hand and say thank you for what they were doing. 2007, of course, the military conflict zones were different, but they were beginning to evolve in different parts of the different nations at that time. But people want to actually come forward and make some kind of respect fairly quickly, even though they don't know the person directly. And this has also been something seen with things like the increased observance of Remembrance Sunday. I've been in the parishes where I married Lee to Rebecca in 2007 for nearly 10 years now. But we've seen an increase in the way in which Remembrance Sunday is observed, and people being more intimately sense of association with military conflict and loss. It was nearly 6 years ago that we looked after the wedding. Recollection of him came back very quickly because of the military connection. You make an instant association with the uniform very quickly. He contacted me first by phone because he was based at Catterick Garrison at that particular time. He was asking a combination of personal and practical questions about preparations to be married in the church. I then met him with his then fiancée, and we went through a series of preparations which involved discussions with myself at the vicarage. He was somebody who spoke very openly, very easily, quietly, little bits of humour here and there, but he'd also taken the questions very seriously. He was, we were very aware that he was entering into two enormous commitments. One was with the military, one was, of course, with his marriage. And we were very aware of the kind of increased risk factor that was involved. We often talked about the way in which more than likely he would be sent overseas at some stage in the early years of his married life.
Reverend Guy James there talking to us a little bit earlier. Well, there have been many tributes for Lee Rigby. The most moving perhaps from his family, saying that he was a loving son, husband, father, brother and friend to so many. And emotions after his death, very raw here in Woolwich, also very raw in Middleton, in Greater Manchester, where he is from. Let's go there to talk to Fiona Trott, our correspondent. And Fiona, a prayer service for Lee Rigby this morning. Sorry, I don't think we can hear from Fiona Trott at the moment, but there is a prayer service being held, a community prayer service for Lee Rigby in Middleton in Greater Manchester, where he's from. We can hear now, though, from the Community Secretary, Eric Pickles. I was talking to him a little bit earlier on this morning about his thoughts after the murder of Lee Rigby here in Woolwich, and whether he has any questions about the news that the security services, MI5, didn't know about the two radical Islamist suspects who are now under armed guard in hospital after having been shot by the armed police. Let's hear from Eric Pickles.
I'm still immensely sad that this young man should serve his country and to be murdered in such a brutal, almost a Stone Age fashion by two people on the very streets of Britain. It's dreadful.
And of course, questions have been asked about the security services, MI5, who appear to have known about these two suspects for a number of years. There will be, we gather, a Commons inquiry into that. What are your thoughts about that? Should they have done more? Could they have done more?
Well, there's an investigation taking place right now, and the inquiry won't take place until after those investigations are complete. I think we should make clear that it was always the intention to look into what the security forces knew and the nature of the policing long before it became apparent that the security forces knew something about these two young men. But I have to say, there is a world of difference between holding extremist views and then going out and deciding to murder.
And are you worried about the number of young Muslims, perhaps who do hold extreme views, who have been radicalised to the extent that these two men, these two suspects at least, carried out such an act?
I think I'm comforted by the almost unanimous condemnation of this by Muslim groups throughout the country, and I think there's a stark difference between the disaster in 7/7, where people were looking at the motivation of the bombing, and this unequivocal condemnation of this dreadful act. And I think, in a way, those young men were seeking to cause dissent on our streets, have brought about a unification of feeling within the community, whether it be in Greenwich or wider, that what was done was utterly wrong, utterly inexcusable.
That's the Community Secretary, Eric Pickles, speaking to me a little bit earlier on. Here in Woolwich, around the barracks where Lee Rigby was based, the roads have now reopened, the traffic is flowing, but as I was saying, emotions still very raw, still Woolwich a place in real shock about what happened here on a street in broad daylight, that a young soldier could be hacked to death. And today, where Lee Middleton comes from, Middleton in Greater Manchester, there is a community prayer service for him, in memory of him. So let's go and talk to our correspondent again, Fiona Trott, who's there. Fiona.
That's right, Ben, yes. The service has just finished. Let me tell you what the Reverend Philip Miller told the congregation. He said, let's do what this community is good at and what it's famous for. help those within it. And he actually knows Lee Rigby's parents very well. He married them, and he's actually spoken to them both and told them about the service here this morning at the community centre behind me. They say they were very grateful that people were showing their support. Let me show you how else they're showing their support on the estate here. You can see that this is just one of several houses that are putting out St George's flags for Lee Rigby, whose ambition it was to be a soldier, and that's something that the Reverend was talking about this morning here as well. He said he had a very short life, but at least people could try and take comfort from the fact that Lee Rigby had achieved his ambition. But it's been a very, very difficult 2 days for people living on the Langley estate. It's a kind of estate where families know each other very well. They're in and out of each other's homes. They knew where Lee Rigby was based, and when they heard reports of what was happening in London, they were concerned about it. Then they saw police arriving at the parents' home, and they started to put two and two together and were absolutely horrified because of the violent nature of the attack. But what's been very difficult is the fact that it's been a very public one too. But at least this morning they have been remembering the Lee Rigby they knew, Riggers they called him, a man who the family say was like a big brother to people here on the estate. He would do anything for anybody. He was cheeky, humorous and larger than life.
Yeah, you really get that impression from all the tributes, Fiona, that have been paid to him, that he was, a young soldier who was always prepared to have a laugh, very, very, very popular with his colleagues, but also, of course, the father of a young baby.
That's right, yes. He'd only been married for about 6 years. He had a 2-year-old son, Jack, and that's what makes it very difficult as well, isn't it, for the people living here, for the family involved. And that was something that they spoke about in the service here this morning too. But you're right, Ben, this impression that he was doing the job that he loved, and he was very proud of it too. The family, we understand, have other relatives who are in the army. It was something that he set his sights on. He achieved that, and that was another thing that one of his colleagues was talking about. During parades, he would stick out. You could identify him easily because he would be the one with a huge smile on his face, and that is something that people here in Middleton are trying to remember here this morning.
Okay, Fiona, thank you very much indeed. Fiona Trott reporting there. Well, plenty of questions this morning. The investigation, of course, goes on by the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command. They are questioning two men, the two men who are in hospital under armed guard, and then also another man and a woman who were arrested separately last night, but in connection with this investigation. There are wider questions too about the radicalisation of young Muslims in this country and about the security services, MI5. How much did they know about the two suspects who were shot by armed police on the streets here? It's been reported that MI5 did know about them for a number of years, although didn't have them necessarily under any surveillance. But at the end of it all, a young British soldier has lost his life in the most gruesome way possible, hacked to death just around the corner from here. And as you can see here, the flowers have been laid in tribute to him, to drummer Lee Rigby. Back now from Woolwich to the studio.
Ben, thank you very much indeed.
Well, let's return now to Heathrow, one of the world's busiest